Good evening, folks. It's Coddle here. I see my slide has decided to shrink into almost oblivion. I apologize for that. But welcome to the National Support session for ENTP7312. This is the exam overview or exam prep session. So yes, we've come to that point in the semester where we're looking at the exam and what the exam means and where do we go and how do we need to prepare for this exam. An important note in an email that I've received repeatedly and answered repeatedly, I think I might even have done an announcement about it. This is a sit-down exam. I do understand that your BMNG, your business management exam, has changed from an initial sit-down to a take-home, and that was simply a fault. It was always intended to be a take-home exam. ENTP was always intended to be a sit-down on-campus exam. I know last semester both were sit-downs. For some reason, a decision was made that BizMan would turn into a take-home this semester. Unfortunately, the same decision was not made for ENTP. I have queried this repeatedly, and please do not ask me for an explanation. I do not have one for you. But the fact is, it will be an on-campus sit-down exam. Okay. Now that I've disappointed many of you, let's have a couple of things to look at. The key points I want to mention to you. This exam is 35% of your final mark. Obviously, you would have had to make CAS to get into the exam. As I recall, there will be very few of you, if any, that didn't make CAS. Basically, I don't think there's anybody that handed in the assignments that didn't make CAS. I have done the ICE marks and uploaded the ICE marks for those of you that did the ICE. So everything's out of my hands at this stage. If you've got any queries regarding your marks or anything like that, please contact the online campus for them to further deal with it. Please remember something, you must get 30% sub-minimum in the exam. That means even if your overall mark, if you combine your CAS mark with what you get in the exam, is over 50%, but you got less than 30 in the exam, it's game over. It ends right there. You also do not qualify for a sub. Overall, you need a 50%, a 30 sub minimum, and a 50% to pass. If you get 40 or above, you will qualify for a sub, and I wrote sub there. That should be sup with a P, supplementary exam. And that's not a space you want to go to, but yes, you need that overall 40 for the sub. Please keep in mind that many of you, and this I haven't put on the slide, many of you are in a position that you are, could graduate next year. Keep in mind, if you have got 2 or less subjects that you have already attempted, and it doesn't matter when you attempted them, you could have attempted them 4 years ago. If you've got 2 or less subjects that you've attempted but not passed, and if you get those subjects you can graduate, you can write a special exam in January. If you're in that position after the exams, please contact your campus, the online campus, and discuss it with them so that you can write your special exam, because that's a last-ditch opportunity. So say, for example, it's entrepreneurship. You've passed everything, all your subjects. You're just doing this exam. You fail this exam. You write a supplementary. You fail the supplementary. So now you haven't got that subject to graduate. You can then write a third time in January a special exam, which will then allow you to graduate with the rest of your class. Please don't forget that, because it's a horrible thing when people forget that and they're in that position and then they repeat the year and they graduate a year later. As I have it currently, the exam is scheduled for 20 November. That was what my PAS said this morning when I checked it. I'm not saying your exam's on the 20th November. Please check your own PAS. Download the latest PAS. Updates sometimes happen quite late, and you don't want to miss the exam because of a change in the PAS. As I said, it's a sit-down on campus. Be sure to be there, as in there in the venue, half an hour before the time. You guys are not used to traveling campus. You're not sure what the traffic is like. I would aim to be there at least an hour before the time. Yes, I know it sounds like a schlep, but I'd rather be there an hour before the time than 20 minutes late for the exam. Because remember, if you walk in late, you don't get extra time. Time starts when time starts. So give yourself plenty of time, and also time to be relaxed, time to take a deep breath, and so that you can go into the venue in a calm state of mind. It will be a 2 hour exam, so it's 120 minutes, 120 marks. So you need to write at the speed of a mark a minute. And I'll talk a little bit later about the approach that you need to take. As you should be aware, there's some pre-released cases. Um, look through those cases, read through the cases. I do not think that you have the luxury of the time in the exam to be able to read through the cases for the first time in the exam. I would, as part of my preparation, read through all those cases 2 or even 3 times, so that when you see the case, you can say, oh, okay, it is that case. So you know the story behind the case. When you get your reading time, which would be, I think, 10 minutes, when you get your reading time, you don't read the case, you read the questions. And then when you've read the questions, you think about the case because you understand and have read and have knowledge of the case. And you think, what does this question mean in terms of the case? The expected layout would be 5 to 15 mark questions typically. I've not seen the exam, so I'm speculating. 5 to 15 mark questions. You might have an odd 20 marker, and then the longer questions, single question, would be 25 to 30, 5 marks. Do not be surprised if there's a combination of themes. So don't expect a question from Learning Unit 1, a question from Learning Unit 2, a question from Learning Unit 3. It's more and more we're seeing that they will take elements from Learning Unit 6 and combine it with elements of Learning Unit 3 and combine it with elements from Learning Unit 1 and put all of that in a single question. So you need to be able to combine those factors, put them together, and come up with a answer that covers all of those bases from different learning units. The approach in the exam, read your questions. Many of the questions are put in quite a lengthy way, and there's a reason for it. It's not to waste your time. It's to try to give you as many hints and tips on what we talk about: a hook, a line, a sinker, in the question. And you want to read the complete question. In most questions case, the actual instruction, the task that you are given to do, comes right at the end. So the question itself might be 4 or 5 lines long, but the last line typically is the one that says, advise your friend on how they could be able to finance their business, or advise your friend in which form of a business they should register the entity. But it tells you a story and typically you have a friend, Mpo. Mpo wants to start a small business, buying and selling shoes. Mpo's not sure where they should locate this business. Mpo understands that you've studied a course in entrepreneurship and approaches you and asks you, how would you go about determining where to establish a business? Advise your friend Mpo on the various factors of a business location. There's the question. So they've told you this whole story. Story gives you background. So you would have to then read all of that to understand the background, because now you need to answer Mpo. If you purely give me the 5 location factors, for example, and this is an example, this is not obviously in the current curriculum. If you only give the 5 location factors, you're probably going to get half the marks. Because you must tell Mpo where Mpo should situate their business, which is a business of buying and selling shoes, and why should they situate their business there? Why is it applicable to somebody that's buying and selling shoes as opposed to somebody that is manufacturing fireplaces, or somebody who is upholstering chairs, or somebody who's selling insurance policies, or somebody who's opening a restaurant? So you need to base the examples, the application, and at a third year level application counts quite a significant amount of marks. You need to base your answer around the case that you've been given. Mostly that case will be based off one of the case studies that you previously been given. So read and make sure you understand what you are asked. Next point, bank your marks. At a mark a minute, for you guys who are writing, and none of us are used to writing. I mean, I write on the keyboard. I hardly ever write with a pen or pencil. A mark a minute is quite a lot. So you need to bank your marks. If you read a question and you're not sure what they are asking, you are not sure what the answer is, you cannot recall what this work was, move on. Forget what you've been taught about people saying, oh, you can't leave out a question. You've got to do the question in the order that they've been asked. I don't care. Make sure you clearly number your questions. In other words, if you're doing 1A, number it 1A, then 2C or 2.3, then clearly number it. Make sure I can see what question you are answering. I will find the question, I will find your answer in your script. Don't worry about that. But do the questions that you know that you've got the answers right, so that you can bank those marks, so that you don't run out of time and there are still questions that you could have answered, but you've answered questions that you were not sure of and you're taking a bit of a flyer. Please, if you are not doing the questions in order, make sure that as you do a question, you mark it on the question paper. I have seen students do the same question twice in the paper. They'll do it like early on and then much later do that question again, simply because they didn't realize they had done it and they weren't following the order. So do everything that you can do, and then you go back right at the end to those questions you haven't done and you're not sure about, and you wing them. Now, what I'm talking about when I'm say wing them, you have 3 years plus learning behind you. Trust yourself. Look at the question and say, okay, I don't know. I still have 15 minutes left. Let me write an answer, and then write an answer. Anything, just write it. Write what you think. I cannot give you marks for an empty page. But if there's a 10-mark question and you've written half a page, which is about what you write for a 10-mark question, there's going to be something in there based on your knowledge of the past couple of years. There's going to be something in there that's going to be worth marks. You're probably not going to get 10 out of 10, but I'm probably going to be able to find 1 or 2 marks there. And those 1 or 2 marks might eventually end up being the 1 or 2 marks that make sure that you pass. So don't say, I don't know, so I'm not even going to attempt. Have a bash at it. Very important, what I have seen in the past, and I saw this with you guys in the first semester as well. When you're studying, please make sure that you study the headings as well. I can't remember if I mentioned it on the next slide. I'll repeat it if we've mentioned it. So in learning unit 6, there are the 4 states of business, if I remember correctly, in the developing economy. You need to study those 4 states. If you listen to learning unit 6, if you've listened to it, you'll remember this, because I mentioned it there as well. You need to study those 4 states, but study the heading as well, because the question is going to sound like the heading. And what I've seen in the past is people might know the information, but they don't link the information to the heading. And it's a neurological thing. It's almost like not having an index for what you study. So you're just studying content, but you're not studying what the content is. So when you see the question, your brain doesn't know where did you put that content away. But if you studied something like, let me go back to my previous example, the location factors, and you say the first location factor is customers, the second location factor is raw materials, the third location factor is infrastructure. When they ask you location factors, your brain's going to say, oh, location factors, it's those 5 things that are stored there, and your brain's going to be able to retrieve it. But if you simply went and said customer, raw materials, etc., your brain's not going to know what are those things. And later on, if they ask you a question and they say to you the question is around infrastructure, you might then remember it because your brain knows infrastructure. But it doesn't know location factors because you never studied the heading. You never told your brain, the information I'm giving you now is regarding this. So please make sure, and I can only describe it, I'm sure you understand what I say. I can only describe it as studying the headings, so that you make sure that your brain knows where you are putting the stuff away. Right, let's move on. So, there are 6 learning units that you need to master. So, you need to download your module guide if you haven't downloaded your module guide. And then you need to work from your learning outcome to the prescribed materials. So if you look at each learning unit, so if you take learning unit 1, there's say 7 learning outcomes. You need to answer each one of those learning outcomes. So take the learning outcome, you look at your prescribed material, which is your textbook for learning units 1 to 4, and you look for where is this covered in the textbook, and you make notes on that. There I wrote it, study the headings. And then you move on into learning unit 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and make sure you've covered all the learning outcomes. Those are your notes. I have given you notes. My notes are not for you to study. They are my notes. You must prepare your own notes. If you go look under, additional resources, you'll find notes, my notes there. Now, learning unit 5 and 6 are tricky. And in the past, when this has been done, students have typically struggled. So learning unit 5 and 6 have prescribed articles. These are the articles. That list, and yes, I know it's difficult for you to read that list, but they're in your module guide as well. If you go to more resource sources, you will find a tab there that says prescribed articles. If you click on that tab, you will find all the articles there. So you don't even have to go download them. I have downloaded them and uploaded them under more resources. You should work through those articles. And when you're looking at learning unit 5 and learning unit 6, I have also given you notes on this. So I have gone through the articles and I find the basic information regarding learning unit 5 and learning unit 6, and I've made notes of them and I've uploaded it for you. I do not believe those notes will be enough for you to pass, but I've done that so that you've got a basis to work from. Please go and also read the articles. Traditionally, when learning units have been prescribed and they've used articles, students fail to read the articles and students fail. It's as simple as that. Students work from the textbooks, they refuse to work from the articles. This is a double whammy. You've basically covered learning unit 1 to 4 already, and you've been assessed on those. So in my opinion, a good exam paper would cover predominantly, not only, but predominantly learning unit 5 and 6, because that's the untested work. So if I was setting the paper, I'd probably do about 80 marks out of 5 and 6, but at least the half out of 5 and 6, and the rest of the marks would come out of the other 4 learning units that have already been assessed. So understand the importance of working through these articles in conjunction with your learning outcomes and in conjunction with the brief notes that I've written. Please understand, these are academic articles you would know from your research module. but they take a while to read. You cannot start studying this the day before the time. Okay, Carl will stop preaching. What I've said about the preparation of articles on this side is for Learning Unit 5 and 6. When you read the articles, don't worry about the methodology part. It's not important, but read the lit review, read the findings and recommendations. That's where you'll find the answers. And you only need to look at the learning outcomes. Find the corresponding info in the articles. It's good to know, not to know, but to look at the complete scope of the article. It gives you better background. For example, if you think of, what can I think of in Learning Unit 5 or 6? Stock fells. Very few of you have got exposure to stock fells. I know there's one section in the one article that deals with stock fells, but that's a complete learning outcome. And I would consider even reading wider than that, just these articles about stock fells. For example, when I taught it, if you remember, when you listened to Learning Unit 6, I went through the different types, or I listed the different types of stock fells. That's not in the article, but it's good to have that background because it serves as a nice example when you need to answer a question around stock fells. It gives you good background. So yes, look at the learning outcome, formulate a decent answer, but use my notes as guidance only. Guys, that's about what I have for you. Please feel free to ask me any questions. I will be in the office till well after your exams. I'm only going on leave early in December because I still have to mark your exams before I go and leave. So if there's questions, if you're not sure, please let me know. This is officially the last class, but if there's a need or students would like me to explain something, and there's a big enough need, I'm happy to come online and spend some time with you. But I'm also happy if there's things that you don't understand, drop me an email. I'll send an email back to you. If I think it's a big enough or difficult enough thing, I'll make an announcement or make a short recording and upload the short recording for you as well. Guys, good luck for the exam. It's the last big push before you are finished. And I wish you well, and I'm hoping that for those of you that are in the Greater Cape Town area, that I'll see you sometime next year at graduation. And please, at graduation, if you're there, because I've never met any of you, please swing by, just say, how's it, Gordel, just so I can put a face to the name. Thanks, guys. Keep well. All the best.